Welcome to the Strange North channel. In this video, I'm going to show you 5 more cryptids in the province of Alberta. Last week I did a video on the top 5 cryptids in the province, and there were a few that I didn't get to in that video just because I felt my video was getting super long, but there are definitely more than 5 cryptid legends in the province, and so I wanted to do another video to cover some of those ones. Also, the cryptid video that I posted last week is by far my most viewed video, and so it seemed like there was definitely some extra interest around this topic. And I just wanted to say a very sincere thank you to everyone who has been watching, liking, engaging with my videos. I've even had some useful criticisms because really I'm just starting out and I want to be improving these videos. And I'll do my best to continually improve and consistently put out stuff that I find interesting. And it turns out Alberta definitely has more than 5 cryptid legends, so let's get into some of those ones as well. At number 1 to start our list is the Thunderbird. Now, the Thunderbird is a legendary creature that is part of the folklore and mythology of many First Nations groups from throughout North America, including the Blackfoot of the Canadian prairies. Many decades ago, there was a French archaeologist named Claude Schaefer who spent a bunch of time with the pagan Blackfoot of northern Montana, who themselves had a long history in southern Alberta. Claude Schaefer collected many stories from this group, and they talked about many Thunderbird sightings that happened to their ancestors in Alberta. There's a story about a blood Blackfoot named Harry Undermouse who had a grandfather who was a Cree medicine man named White Bear. And according to the story, one day White Bear was hunting deer and he killed a deer and he was tending to the body when all of a sudden he was picked up and carried off by a giant bird. The bird had grabbed White Bear and the carcass of the deer, something that no giant bird that we know of could ever do. And according to the story, this giant bird carried White Bear along with this deer carcass to this giant bird's nest up in the mountains. White Bear eventually got out of there and escaped the nest so that he could live to tell this tale, but this story became a very legendary tale of an encounter with the Thunderbird. There was another Blackfoot man named Dog Takes a Gun who talked about his parents seeing a Thunderbird in the 1860s near what is now Calgary, Alberta. And also in the 1860s, pagan Blackfoot warriors led by a man named Heavy Runner claimed to see a Thunderbird as they were on a raiding party. And according to this archaeologist Claude Schaefer, who had been communicating with these groups, they also talked about a story about a curio dealer in Calgary that was in possession of a giant wing that possibly belonged to a Thunderbird, and this was as late as 1940. I'd like to go deeper into the Thunderbird legend when I talk about cryptids in British Columbia, just because the West Coast First Nations groups really have a much richer mythology surrounding the Thunderbird. However, given the legends and stories that have occurred in this province, I would definitely consider the Thunderbird an official cryptid of Alberta. At number 2 is the Battle River Monster. This was a very large creature that was sighted in the Battle River near the town of Rosalind in the spring of 1934. The first person to see this creature was Chris Hansen, who is the owner of the Battle River coal mine. He described the creature as being 30 feet long, very slender, almost like a large sea serpent that would sort of come in and out of the water, and it would churn the water violently around it. And Chris Hansen wasn't able to catch this predator, but he did get a good look at it. After this, many other people saw this creature in the water, and it turned into a bit of a frenzy. There was a lot of debate over whether this creature was a large sturgeon or not. That debate has happened many times regarding legendary lake and river monsters, just because sturgeon can get so big and they live so long. Honestly, do a Google image search of giant sturgeons. They can get so big and there's almost something prehistoric looking about them. And so I think it's definitely possible that some sightings turn out to be sturgeon, but during the Battle River monster sightings, there are a few people that insisted it was way too big to be a sturgeon, and that could not have been the case. Here's a quote from an Edmonton Journal article from June 18th of 1934. Quote, "Residents of the area and sightseers who arrived in 100 automobiles spent the afternoon exploding dynamite in the water, hoping to blast Alberta's Ogopogo from the deep channel. They never did end up blowing this creature out of the water with dynamite. In fact, after the initial sightings, this creature disappeared. After 1934, it wasn't seen at all. Although in later years, people would talk about river monsters in different rivers in Alberta. But this creature wasn't seen again in this area, and it just became this really cool legend of Battle River. And this legend definitely deserves a mention when you're talking about cryptids in the province. At number 3 is Dogman. Now, Dogman is a cryptid that has been seen throughout North America. It is essentially a humanoid bipedal creature covered in hair, roughly the size of a human, and it has a head that looks very dog-like. Some people have described it as looking a bit like a hyena, but this cryptid has become known as the Dogman. Now, the Dogman has been spotted across North America, but it's a little bit more prevalent in the east, particularly around the Great Lakes. The state of Michigan has had a bunch of sightings. That is an area I really associate with the Dogman, but there are definitely some stories coming out of Alberta as well. There's a website called dogmanencounters.com. This is probably the best place online where you're going to find a collection of Dogman encounters from throughout North America. There is a June 7th, 2016 entry on this site by Jessica Janvier where she describes seeing the Dogman while she was driving between Elk Point and Vermilion. There's a YouTube channel called Those Endless Mysteries, and they did a video a couple years ago that talked about 2 Dogman sightings in rural Alberta. There's a popular Apple podcast called Supernatural Circumstances in which people call in and describe stories to the host. And in this one episode, the host of the program and paranormal investigator Morgan Knudsen talks about someone calling in from Alberta. Apparently this person had an acreage near Nisku, which is just south of Edmonton, and they saw one of these dogmen in the back of their truck on their property, and apparently this thing was acting very aggressive towards them, and eventually it did run away, but this whole experience really freaked them out. I couldn't find anything in the old newspaper archives that talked about people in the past seeing this creature in the province, and so they may have, I just couldn't find anything to back that up. And like I said, the Dogman is more of an Eastern North America thing. It's been spotted all over the place, but I more associated with the East, particularly the Great Lakes area. But regardless, there have definitely been a few stories of Dogman sightings in Alberta, and so it definitely deserves a mention when you're talking about cryptids within the province. At number 4 is the Monster of Saddle Lake. This lake is about 165 kilometers northeast of Edmonton, and there's a large First Nations reserve around it. And these indigenous groups have a legend about a very large creature that lives in this lake, and there's a story about this monster abducting and killing a young girl many years ago. This creature is said to be huge. The largest estimate of its length is 69 meters, which is insanely long. It's said to have a long horse-shaped head with a big horn in the middle of its forehead. Over the years, people talked about seeing this creature in the lake, and then in the 1980s, there were so many sightings that it prompted authorities to temporarily shut the lake down in 1985 so that this creature could be investigated. On July 31st and August 1st, so 2 days in 1985, the University of Alberta sent 3 specialists by helicopter to the lake to investigate this creature. Included in this group was Wayne Roberts, who at the time was the curator of the university's zoology museum, and also Jim Butler, who is a University of Alberta wildland recreation professor. These specialists spent a couple days in this area taking samples, taking pictures, and ultimately this team from the university could not find any evidence at the time that there was a creature living in this lake. And although there have been sightings since then, the legend has kind of died down a bit in recent times, but the Monster of Saddle Lake is such a legend in the province, and it definitely deserves a mention on the top cryptids of Alberta. And at number 5 to close our list is the Konosu, or the Monster of Cold Lake. Cold Lake is about 300 kilometers northeast of Edmonton, and it's one of the biggest, deepest lakes in the province. It actually sits right on the border of Alberta and Saskatchewan. Indigenous groups in the area of this lake prior to European settlers had a legend about a large creature that lived in this lake, and they named it Konosu, which is the Cree word for big fish. The indigenous people in this area have a legend of a man who used to paddle his canoe along the shore of Cold Lake, and he would travel along the shore to visit his lover. And one day he was out on the lake, and the lake was very calm, and he decided to paddle his canoe across French Bay. And while he was doing this, this giant creature came up and bit his canoe in half and dragged him down into the water. And while this was happening, his lover was watching, horrified, from the shore. There's also a story about this Konosu grabbing a moose that was walking in a shallow part of the Lake. The moose eventually freed itself and got away, but according to the story, this Konosu was later found on the shore of Cold Lake, and according to people who saw it, it was about 40 feet long. If you're interested in more information on the Cold Lake monster, you should definitely check out an article by Harold McNeil on his website, mcneillifestories.com. This article goes into great detail on the lake itself and its formation, as well as the history of the area and many people's sightings of this creature throughout time. And so the Konosu of Cold Lake has definitely earned a spot among the cryptids of Alberta. So those were 5 more legitimate cryptid legends from within the province. If you enjoyed this video, definitely check out the video I posted last week of Alberta's top 5 cryptids. I covered some really interesting legends in that one as well. And if you'd like to watch more of my videos, please subscribe to my channel. I'm going to be uploading at least 1 new video per week. And if you got some value out of this video, please give it a like. I'm just starting out on YouTube. I can definitely use all the help I can get. And I would be fascinated to know about people's personal cryptid sightings within the province or anywhere really. So please comment on this video if you'd like to add anything. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Strange North channel.